Hello and welcome to another edition of the Fifth Quarter. I'm Mike Ciarochi, sports editor of the Herald-Standard, joined again by George Von Benko, author of Memory Lane and radio personality on WMBS radio. George, Steelers have it doesn't look like as much of a challenge now as it did a few weeks ago, but traveling to Indy, taking on the 0-2 Indianapolis Colts without Peyton Manning.
Well, when you looked at this game, before the season started, everybody had it circled. This was going to be a big test. They're going into Lucas Oil Stadium, which is the site of the Super Bowl this year, to play the Colts. And then, of course, the neck problem with Peyton Manning. I was surprised. We talked about this. I talked about it with several people at the game on Sunday, that Manning went overseas to Europe to have stem cell surgery done on his injured neck.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that's going to get him back for this week's game.
No, he won't be back. They're going to be going with Kerry Collins, who they lured back out of retirement.
And among the people that you mentioned that had this game circled on our calendar were the execs at NBC.
Yes.
Making this a Sunday night game, the football night in America, the whole 9 yards.
They're probably wondering, what were we thinking?
Well, now, especially after opening weekend when the Steelers got drubbed by Baltimore, the Colts went to Houston and got a 32-7 defeat handed to them by the potent Houston Texans, I believe. Still, it's a loss. After that loss last week, Indy hosted Cleveland. I'm pretty sure they were the home team in that game. At Lucas Oil Stadium, and the Browns, of all people, knocked them down 29-19.
And once again, only one touchdown in the game for Indy. They did get several field goals, but they've only scored one touchdown in each of the first two games. And Collins is obviously, if you look at his numbers, struggling to master this Indianapolis offense, which Manning did so well. He improvised, he came up to the line of scrimmage, he called the plays. I mean, this is a difficult offense to master. He's got weapons with Reggie Wayne and Dallas Clark and Austin Collie and Joseph Adai. But the first thing that jumped out at me when we looked at the stats, 5.6 yards per pass. That's not very good.
No. He's completed 50% of his passes. But yeah, no, Peyton Manning, if he were in there, that number would be more than double that, I assume. I think it's a fairly safe assumption. Of course, what the Colts are learning right now is the importance of the quarterback position. I mean, Peyton Manning is a, 2-3-time league MVP.
Well, especially in that system.
Yes.
So much rides on the quarterback in their system to make adjustments, and they run the up-tempo offense and make the calls at the line of scrimmage. That's not an easy offense to run.
And the Colts are missing a little bit more than just Peyton Manning.
Oh, yes.
Tom Moore is no longer
and neither is Eugene Huey.
Gene Huey, the Uniontown native, is no longer with the Colts.
Howard Mudd is no longer with the Colts, the great offensive line. He's working for Philadelphia. They hired him, but he was the longtime offensive line coach. They gutted that staff, and much to the chagrin of a lot of people. I remember the outrage when Gene Huey was let go just before we left to go to the Super Bowl last year.
Right. But hey, it is what it is. They kind of, the Irsay family made that bed. I guess they're going to have to lie in it. But let's look a little more specifically at the Steelers coming into this game. After the drubbing in Baltimore opening week, second week they came back and basically took no prisoners in a shutout win.
A workmanlike.
Yeah, it was very workmanlike. I don't think anybody knows exactly how much we can take out of that. What do you think coming into this game?
Obviously, it's a different challenge for them. Because whether you like it or not, even though I don't like the numbers when I look at it, Kerry Collins is a much more accomplished quarterback than Tavarius Jackson is.
Yes.
So it's more of a challenge in that regard. It's whether Collins has mastered the offense in Indianapolis enough to make things work. And he's got people to throw, Dallas Clark and Reggie Wayne.
I was just going to make that point, as opposed to Tavarius Jackson in Seattle. Kerry Collins has some targets. He has
who did he have to throw to? The one guy wasn't in there, was not in the lineup, and the rest of the guys were a bunch of no-names.
Speaking of the Colts, you have not only Reggie Wayne and Dallas Clark and
Austin Collie.
But you have Pierre Garçon, you have Joseph Adai. You know, those are all very competent, if not exceptional,
and a fairly
NFL
decent
wide
offensive line compared to what they faced with Seattle.
Right,
Jeff Saturday anchoring the middle of the line, and they got that number one draft pick from Austin, and Lukenbach, and you know, they've got some people. You know.
Yeah. Now defensively for Indy, I think we were both a little shocked when we looked up the stats of their defense.
Well, two guys that you really would think would be the bell cows of their defense, that's Dwight Freeney and Robert Mathis, their bookend defensive ends. They have way down in the defensive stats. I think they've got 1 sack each. And what did you tell me, like 6 total tackles?
6 total tackles between Freeney and Mathis.
They've almost been non-existent.
Right. And you said they have a sack each, which is accurate. The only 2 sacks the Colts have produced this through 2 games,
which I hope remains that way.
Well, yeah, you know, and speaking of sacks and defensive play, maybe this is the week the Steelers defense can break out and get a few turnovers coming their way.
Well, certainly they've got some people feeling their way offensively. They might be forcing some turnovers. You know, one thing we really didn't mention about that last Seattle ball game is they did start Marcus Gilbert, the Steelers did, at right tackle. And while it wasn't a ringing endorsement, Tomlin said
he held his own.
He held his own, and you know, he was pleased with what he did.
I believe he said something about in the first half there were some running lanes that were opened up by on his side of the field, which is always a good
Now, it's going to be interesting to see how he responds with either Freeney or Mathis in front of him.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did fairly well in the preseason games against a couple of top-notch defensive players from a few of the other teams. The names and the teams kind of.
Well, the other thing that surprised me is when you and I were taking a peek at that defense, we recognized Freeney and Mathis. We recognized Gary Brackett, the linebacker. I didn't recognize anybody in the secondary.
There's not much else that you can pin your hat on. Gary Brackett is the only guy listed as a middle linebacker on the roster. So who knows? But you know what? They're gonna tee it up and kick it off at about 8:20 Sunday night anyway. So
when you're going on the road, you never take anything for granted.
No.
That place, they'll probably be pumping the sound in like they always do.
Oh yeah, that's one of the louder stadiums in the league. It's going to be interesting to me, at least, to see how much of that noise is actually generated by the paying customers.
Well, that's what I was referring to. They were accused many times of pumping up the volume artificially.
Okay, but with an 0-2 start, the fans may be a little more hesitant to get up and start cheering for the Colts.
I think they may be sitting on their hands with a wait-and-see attitude, and that would play into the Steelers' hands. You know, it's just one of those things, and I don't think they will take anything. I mean, we got that impression from the locker room that the win over Seattle, in the big scheme of things, all it was is you made your record 1-1, but it doesn't really mean anything in the larger scope of things.
You know, and having said that, I still think the Steelers will come into this game defensively with the same mindset they had last week. They want to stop the Colts running game first.
Well, the Febreze hasn't gotten the stench off from the first game.
No, right. But I think that'll be not necessarily as easy as it was last week. But I don't think the Colts running game has set the world on fire either.
No, I mean, they've got a quality back in Joseph Adai, but you know, with the passing game sputtering the way it is, it doesn't necessarily set up your running game.
Yeah, and they have another recent high draft pick, Donald Brown, I believe.
Yeah, from UConn.
Connecticut is on their roster. You know, they haven't set the world on fire offensively or defensively so far. I'd be shocked if they were able to run the ball against the Steelers defense.
I don't see that happening. I really don't.
Probably shocked if they tried very often. To tell you the truth.
Well, that's the other. You know, if they want to try, that sort of plays in their hands.
Yeah.
But I really think their philosophy for Pittsburgh, it always has been take the run away, force them to pass. And in this case, it's even more prevalent because you've got a quarterback who's trying to learn the intricacies of a system that's very difficult. And we even heard, you know, Reggie Wayne before the season started, hey, this is not going to be easy because this system is built for Peyton Manning.
Yeah. And after the opening loss to Houston, that's a divisional loss for the Colts. I saw a few things on the internet where Reggie Wayne was trying to step up as a team leader. Now, he had a fairly productive game this past week. He is their leading receiver. He and Dallas Clark have the only 2 touchdown catches. But there's only so much you could do in terms of leadership when you're playing wide receiver.
Right. Well, you're sort of at the mercy of the quarterback. Is he going to get the ball to?
Right. Right.
And as I said, Collins is a veteran, and he's done a lot of good things in this league. But this is almost like he's in training camp right now because he came in so late.
Right. Right. Yeah. And at his age, he probably didn't need the extra hits in training camp, but it's a knowledge. It is the knowledge,
And yes, a veteran, picks up things quicker, but he hasn't played this type of offense.
No, or let alone at the speed in which you have to play this offense.
Right.
Half the time Peyton Manning's not even having a huddle.
And I did see some video of Indianapolis, and there was some confusion at times when they were lining up and he was trying to make changes, and you expect that. Now, this is going to be the 3rd week. You figure he's going to be a little bit better at it. Yeah. But I know Dick LeBeau, just knowing him, is going to try and make things as miserable as he can for him.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I will say this. If the Steelers have a weakness on defense, it's the secondary. And I think it's particularly, the Steelers' defense secondary may be particularly vulnerable against a taller wide receiver like Reggie Wayne.
Yes.
They just, those taller guys just seem to kind of have their way against the Steelers. It could be a couple of big plays for Reggie Wayne in this game.
Could be, but the thing I'm looking for too is Collins at this stage of his career, and he never was a mobile quarterback. Right. He's more of a stationary target, sort of like what Peyton Manning was back there. Right. They're going to know where he's at.
Yeah, yeah, and if the Steelers can keep Reggie Wayne from getting behind him, getting deep,
they can get to him.
Yeah, right. They can get to him, give him a little more time on the pass rush.
Yeah, I think it should be a victory for the Steelers. I just look at it. There's just too many ifs on the other side for Indianapolis.
Yeah, last week I kind of made a prediction that Seattle would score some points against the Steelers.
I thought they would too.
Yeah, that didn't come out so well. I think I could probably repeat the same thing. For all their shortcomings, I think the Colts will probably put some points on the board.
They will because of Adam Vinatieri. If they get close enough, they've got a dynamite kicker in Adam Vinatieri.
Yeah, apparently had 4 field goals last week.
Yeah. So you figure at least they're going to get a field goal or 2 out of this.
Well, if they can get in field goal range.
Right.
But I think...
See, that's the other thing. Seattle, only got into Steeler territory only one time.
One time, yeah. They were 0 for 5 on 3rd downs in the first half. They finished, I believe, 2 of... 17%.
But to suffice it to say, as we wrap it up, I am looking for a Steeler win, and I think they're going to be 2-1 after this week.
Okay. Care to put a score with that, or?
I think it's going to be pretty significant. I think it's going to be like 28-6, something like that.
Okay. Steeler win 28-6. I also believe the Steelers will beat the Colts, improve to 2-1, and keep the Colts kind of going down. There is some history to this. No team has ever hosted a Super Bowl game.
That's true.
So the Colts falling to 0-3.
Jerry Jones was hoping last year, but it didn't work out.
Yeah. He dropped Indy to 0-3, and I think they're dead in the water. I don't think they have a shot at
I will go out on a limb and make another prediction. I think the Steelers are going to force a turnover.
Force one turnover.
At least.
Okay, at least one turnover. I guess I should probably put a score on my prediction as well, that the Steelers will win. I don't know, about 31-17 Steelers.
Wow. Okay.
Sound all right?
Sounds all right, but I don't think the Bo's going to like the 17 points.
You can't shut them out every week.
Yeah, right.
Okay, and now we'll wrap up this edition of the 5th quarter. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.